My name's John, and I was in love, married to the woman I thought would be my forever, and my biggest worry was choosing the right recipe for dinner. But what happened next? It'll leave you speechless, I promise. But life has a way of flipping everything upside down. Let me take you back to where it all began, college. It was there that I first met Emily, or as she called herself, it was during freshman orientation. She was the kind of woman who didn't just walk into a room, she commanded it. Tall, self-assured, and with a smile that could light up the whole campus. While the rest of us were still fumbling through our schedules, she had already become the center of everyone's attention. And then there was me, the shy, clumsy guy, just trying to make sure I didn't spill coffee all over my welcome packet. Our first encounter? A coffee shop on campus. She accidentally brushed into me reaching for a napkin. I've come to realize, years later, it wasn't an accident at all. From there, everything moved fast. We started talking about everything. Our favorite bands, what we wanted from life, our wildest dreams. She talked about becoming a top influencer, traveling the world and rocking designer clothes. I thought it sounded ambitious, but her passion was infectious. A few years later, we were married. Our wedding was straight out of a fairy tale. Fairy lights, mason jars with handwritten name tags, and Em, radiating beauty in her lace gown. I truly thought I had found a diamond in the rough. Little did I know this fairy tale was about to turn into my worst nightmare. For the first few years, everything was perfect. Emily worked tirelessly on her Instagram while I focused on my career as a software engineer. She'd spend hours on photo shoots, editing, and collaborating with other influencers. As her account grew, so did my pride. Watching her sign her first major brand deal felt like a victory for both of us. But here's the truth. No one tells you about fame on social media. It's a double-edged sword. As her followers climbed, so did her ego. Suddenly, it was all about her brand. And I was just a backdrop. Date nights turned into content creation sessions. Vacations were no longer about recharging. They were about perfect photo shoots against sunsets and overpriced cocktails. And if I suggested we just take a moment to breathe and enjoy being together, well, that was never on the agenda. I told myself it was just a phase. She was chasing her dream. But deep down I could feel the cracks starting to show. The woman I fell for, the one who laughed at my corny jokes and shared cheap ramen with me during finals week, was slipping away, replaced by someone obsessed with likes and followers. And then came the gym. At first I was supportive. Good for her, I thought. She wants to stay fit and healthy. But soon enough, the gym became an obsession. Suddenly, she was hanging out with a whole new crowd, young, single, and way too eager to pull her into bars and clubs. They called themselves the Fit Queens. I called them trouble. That's when things started to fall apart. She'd come home late, smelling of tequila and cheap perfume, laughing at something on her phone that I couldn't even begin to understand. "Girls' night," she'd say, waving me off like I was some kind of overprotective parent. And maybe I should have pushed harder back then, but I didn't. I trusted her. I wanted to believe we were still the same team we once were, but I was wrong. Here's the thing about me. I'm not one to brag, but I'd like to think I've done pretty well for myself. After college, I landed a solid job as a software engineer. By the time Emily hit her big break with her influencer career, I was already climbing the corporate ladder, pulling in six figures, and saving up for our future. Stability was my thing. While Emily dreamed of designer handbags and luxury vacations, I focused on ensuring we'd never have to worry about bills or an emergency fund. I guess that's where we differed. Success never went to my head. I was still the same guy who'd treat himself to an extra-large pizza and call it a victory. But for Emily, every dollar was a step toward the next big flex. And trust me, there was always a bigger flex. As Emily's world grew shinier and more extravagant, mine stayed grounded. I'd work long hours and come home to find her giggling on a live stream with her followers, talking about the latest skincare trend or unboxing another package of free designer clothes. At first, I was happy for her. Who wouldn't be proud to see their spouse succeed? But then it started to feel excessive. Let me paint a picture for you. One evening, after a 12-hour shift and fixing bugs that weren't even mine to begin with, I walked in to find our living room transformed into a makeshift photo studio. Tripods, ring lights, clothes scattered across the floor. It was like stepping onto the set of a low-budget fashion shoot. "Hey, babe, can you help me with this lighting?" she called out. Barely glancing up from her phone, I bit my tongue. "Sure," I said, setting my bag down, but what I really wanted to say was, "Can we just have a normal dinner for once?" That was the night I realized we were living in two completely different worlds. My days were consumed by spreadsheets, deadlines, and the rhythm of my routine. Emily's world, on the other hand, revolved around hashtags, likes, and DMs. Somewhere along the line, we lost touch with each other, drifting farther apart with every passing day. Her obsession with the gym only made things worse. It started harmless enough, just workouts and smoothies, but soon it became an all-consuming force in her life. She found a new crowd, a group of young, single women who were as focused on flexing their abs as they were on flexing their social media influence. They called themselves the Fit Queens. I, however, called them Trouble, and that's when things started to spiral. She'd come home late, reeking of tequila, laughing at something on her phone, and I couldn't help but wonder, what the hell had happened to us? "Oh my God, John, you should have seen the bartender last night," she'd rave, completely oblivious to how it sounded. "Total eye candy. Sounds like fun," I'd reply, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Inside, I was burning with anger. Who talks like that about their spouse? And then it happened. The phone call. It was close to midnight. I was in our bedroom trying to focus on work emails when I heard Emily's voice carrying through the walls. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you hear someone say, "You're just so much fun to talk to," your instincts kick in. I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I strained to hear more. "Yeah, he's fine. Just, boring sometimes, but enough about him. What are you doing tomorrow?" She continued, her voice playful, almost seductive. Boring. That word hit me like a slap across the face. She was talking about me, wasn't she? The guy who worked tirelessly to make sure she could follow her dreams without worrying about bills. The guy who still made an effort to surprise her with flowers and date nights. I sat there, fists clenched so tight, my nails dug into my palms. Part of me wanted to storm into the living room, demand an explanation right there and then. But a bigger part of me, the smarter, more controlled part, knew I needed more. If this was what I thought it was, confronting her without proof would be a mistake. That's when I made the decision to check her phone. I know. I felt like a villain sneaking around our bedroom that night, but there was no turning back now. Emily left her phone on the nightstand when she went to take a shower. My heart was pounding in my chest as I reached for it. I wasn't sure if I'd find anything, but my gut told me I would. Unlocking her phone was easier than I had expected. She wasn't exactly tech-savvy, and her passcode hadn't changed in ages. The moment the screen lit up, guilt washed over me like a tidal wave. This was her private space, her world. But then I reminded myself she had already broken the trust between us. I wasn't invading her privacy. I was uncovering the truth. I headed straight for her messages. And there it was, staring me in the face. An unassuming group chat titled, "Fit Queens Unite." My stomach dropped. The messages were graphic, to say the least. I scrolled through, my mind racing, seeing conversations filled with emojis and late-night plans. But then, one message caught my eye and stopped me dead in my tracks. It was from Emily, sent earlier that night. "Honestly, he has no idea. I'm too beautiful to be tied down like this. I deserve to have fun, and if that means a few harmless nights, so be it." My hands shook as I kept reading. John's so boring sometimes. I know he's a good guy, but I didn't sign up to waste my prime years being a housewife. I want excitement, I want attention. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I had always tried to be there for her, to make things work, to create a life where we could both chase our dreams. But this wasn't even about me anymore. I missed out on my wild phase, and it's time I fixed that. There were laughing emojis, more texts from her gym friends, hyping her up, asking for juicy details. One of them even wrote, "Girl, if he's boring, why not upgrade? You're a total catch." I wanted to throw the phone across the room. My blood was boiling, but at the same time I felt nothing. Numb. It wasn't just that she'd cheated, that was bad enough, but the way she spoke about me, the way she dismissed me like I was just some obstacle holding her back from having fun, from living her life the way she wanted. I don't know how long I sat there, reading and rereading those messages, each one sinking deeper into my chest. Finally, I snapped out of it. I started taking screenshots. I didn't know what I would do with them yet, but I knew I'd need proof. Then I found him. Hidden deep in the chat history was a conversation with someone named Ryan. I opened it, my stomach sinking further as I saw what was inside. Flirty texts, inside jokes, plans to meet up, and then pictures. Nothing explicit, but enough to make it clear this wasn't just a harmless friendship. I felt like I was going to be sick. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. How could she do this to me? After everything, after all the sacrifices I'd made to support her, to help her grow her career, this is what I got in return? Sneaking around with some guy who couldn't even spell commitment if you gave him a dictionary. That's when I heard her footsteps. I quickly locked the phone and set it back on the nightstand, lying down, pretending to scroll through my own phone. She walked in, humming some cheerful tune, like everything was fine. She climbed into bed, never even glancing at me. "Good night," she said, flipping off her lamp. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My head was spinning and my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I knew I couldn't keep this secret for long. The truth was out. The confrontation was coming, and it was only a matter of time. The next morning felt like a bad dream. Emily was her usual self, bright, bubbly, humming along to some pop song as she made her smoothie. It was like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just crushed me the night before. Each time she smiled that perfect, carefree smile, it felt like a slap. I couldn't help but see those texts, her betrayal, the mockery behind those innocent eyes. The more she beamed at me, the more I felt disgusted, like I was suffocating under the weight of her lies. At work I went through the motions, but every thought revolved around her and him. I knew I couldn't let this burn inside me forever. Confronting her was a matter of when, not if. But it had to be on my terms, and I wasn't ready, not yet. When she came home that night, it was later than usual. The smell of tequila hit me before I saw her, and her laugh, a little too loud, a little too giddy, followed her into the house. Her cheeks were flushed, her steps uneven. She was tipsy. "Had fun with the girls?" I asked, keeping my voice even, though the anger in me was starting to boil over. "Oh, totally," she replied casually, tossing her bag on the counter. "We went to a couple of bars, just blowing off steam." I nodded, the words burning my throat. I wanted to scream Ryan's name at her, but instead I swallowed it down. She disappeared into the bathroom, and the silence in the room felt deafening. That's when I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. I could feel my heart in my throat as I saw the message pop up. "Ryan, miss me, see me yet?" My blood ran cold, and for a moment everything went still. But then the rage hit. I grabbed her phone before I could stop myself, unlocked it, and opened the conversation. My fingers moved without thinking. "Hey, Ryan?" I typed, feeling a twisted satisfaction creep through me. Just so you know, I've been hitting 250 on bench. Might be trying your skull out next." I paused, a cruel smirk tugging at my lips. This felt good, too good. "Also, I added, if you think sneaking around with someone else's wife makes you a man, you're dead wrong. You're just a protein shake with legs." I hit send, and the message was barely out before he replied. "Ryan, whoa, Evie?" Without missing a beat, I typed, "Nope, just her boring husband, the one who's paying the bills while you pretend to be a stud at the squat rack." I was about to send more, about to tear him apart word by word, but then I heard her footsteps. The bathroom door creaked open, and I froze, my thumb hovering over the phone. Emily stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on the phone in my hand. "What the hell are you doing?" Her voice cut through the air like a blade. I turned to face her slowly, my body rigid. "Well, well," I said, my voice cold. "Look who decided to join the conversation." Her face drained of color as I tossed the phone onto the bed between us. "Would you like to explain why your little gym buddy thinks it's okay to send you messages like that?" I leaned in, my words like ice. Her voice faltered, barely a whisper. "Give me my phone, Jared." I grinned darkly. Oh, I don't think so. I'm just getting started. Ryan and I are having a lovely chat. Did you know he called you fire emoji hot? Cute, right? She lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of reach. My voice rose. Tell me, Emily, is this the man you've been fantasizing about behind my back? You don't get to play the victim, Emily, I said, my voice hard, cutting through the silence. Not after everything. How could you go through my messages like that? She hissed, her hands trembling with fury, as if the mere act of me looking at her phone was the real betrayal. I laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. Privacy? I mocked, staring at her. You're worried about privacy after everything you've done behind my back? For a brief moment she looked ready to argue, but I wasn't about to let her control this conversation. I raised the phone again, flicking through the messages from Ryan. Oh, this one's gold, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Miss me yet? You looked unbelievable in that black dress last night. Her face went pale, and she stopped dead in her tracks, caught completely off guard. Jared, please let me explain, she begged, her voice shaking with a mixture of guilt and desperation. Explain? I snapped. What exactly are you going to explain? That you've been lying to me this whole time? That you think you're too good to be faithful? Or that I'm just a paycheck to fund your Instagram life? Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. You don't understand, she whispered, voice cracking. Oh, I understand perfectly, I cut her off, rage boiling inside me. You're selfish, Emily. You've been more concerned about your followers, your gym queen lifestyle, than the man who's had your back through everything. She stood there silent as I tossed her phone across the couch, watching it land with a soft thud. Pack your things, I ordered, my tone final. You're out of here tonight. Jared. No, she cried, her steps faltering as she tried to close the distance between us. It was just a mistake. Please, I'll fix it. I swear, I'll fix everything. No, Emily, I said, voice colder than ice. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to rewrite the rules just because you got caught. We're done. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, grabbed her suitcase, and started packing. She followed, crying, pleading with me to stop, but I wasn't going to change my mind. She had already torn apart everything we'd built. When I finished, I called her an Uber, handed her the suitcase, and told her flatly, You can go stay at your mom's. I'll have the rest of your stuff sent over later. She stood there in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, her voice shaking as she said, Jared, I love you. I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind her. The house was eerily quiet after she left. No more ring lights scattered across the living room. No more random TikTok videos or silly dances echoing through the halls. It was just silence. For the first time in years, I was alone in the house. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt empty. I'd been through a storm and now it was over. But I wasn't going to fall apart. If there's one thing I know about myself, it's that I don't crumble when life hits me hard. Emily might have broken my heart, but she didn't take my dignity. I was done. The last shred of my patience had worn thin, and I wasn't about to sit around anymore. I had to take control. The very next morning, I made 2 calls, one to a lawyer, the other to Adam. You did what? Adam's voice cracked as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You threw her out, just like that? I paced the living room, trying to keep my thoughts straight. Yeah, damn right I did. What was I supposed to do, sit here and pretend everything was okay while she's out there acting like nothing happened with some gym clown? Adam let out a low whistle, clearly in shock. Man, I knew she had a big ego, but this is next level. Tell me about it, I muttered under my breath, anger boiling in my chest. The worst part is, she doesn't even feel bad for what she did. She's not sorry for what she did. She's just sorry she got caught, Adam said, his voice sinking into a frustrated sigh. Hey, if you need any help moving her stuff or, I don't know, slashing Ryan's tires, let me know. I laughed, the sound harsh and short. It felt strange, like a foreign sound. I'll keep that in mind, I said, even though a part of me felt like I'd already reached the end of my rope. The call with the lawyer was much less lighthearted. Apparently, kicking Emily out wasn't the end of it. There were legal complexities. She had rights, and if I wasn't careful, she could take a significant portion of my savings in the divorce. Do you have any proof of her cheating? The lawyer asked, his voice professional, but to the point. "Oh, I've got plenty," I said, thinking back to the screenshots I'd saved. "Text messages, group chats, everything." "Good," he replied. "That'll definitely help, but we need to be careful. If she's as self-centered as you say, she'll probably try to paint herself as the victim." "Of course she will," I groaned. "She's been playing that game for years." "We'll stay ahead of it," he said. "I'll start drawing up the papers. Meanwhile, stay calm. No matter what she does or says, don't engage with her." That was easier said than done. In the days that followed, Emily shifted from apologizing to becoming downright venomous. Her calls never stopped, each voicemail more frantic than the last, begging me to forgive her and fix everything. But as soon as I didn't pick up, her tone flipped. "You think you're perfect, don't you, Jared?" One voicemail started, the venom practically dripping from her words. "Newsflash, you're not. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have needed attention from someone else." By the end of the week, she'd taken to social media. Of course she had. Her Instagram exploded with cryptic posts. Pictures of sunsets with captions like, "When love turns to control, it's time to set yourself free." And her stories? Those were a whole other story. Phrases from sad love songs, wine glasses filled to the brim, vague posts about how people just didn't know how to appreciate a strong woman. At first, I ignored it. Then, one day, a coworker of mine sent me a screenshot that almost made me choke on my coffee. It was a selfie of Emily, looking all dramatic with teary eyes, her hand clutching her chest like some over-the-top soap opera star. The caption read, "Betrayed, abandoned, left to rebuild, but a queen always rises. Independent woman, new beginnings." I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. The comments flooded in. Half of them were sympathetic, and the other half had a growing sense of doubt. Some of her followers, though, were starting to question her version of the story. And then there it was, one comment that made everything click. "Wait, didn't you cheat on him?" That's when I realized I had the upper hand. Emily's whole life was about maintaining that flawless image, that perfect facade. And right now, it was starting to crack. A week later, the divorce papers were served. I couldn't wait to see her reaction, but I had Adam handle the delivery for me. I knew she wouldn't take it well. According to Adam, when he dropped the papers off at her mom's house, the explosion was immediate. "She was a full-on meltdown," Adam said, shaking his head as we knocked back a few drinks that night. "I swear I could hear her screaming through the door." "Good," I said, taking a long gulp of beer. "She deserves to feel what it's like to lose control for once." "Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable," Adam warned. "She's not the type to go down without a fight." And damn, he was right. The next day, I got an email from her lawyer demanding half of everything. The house, my savings, my car. It was almost laughable. Emily had spent so much time flaunting her independence, acting like she didn't need anyone. But now she was acting like she couldn't live without a piece of my paycheck. My lawyer wasn't worried. "Let her ask for the moon," he said casually. "She's not getting it. Not with the evidence we have." And just like that, the battle began. If there's one thing I knew about Emily, it was that she never knew when to quit. While I was quietly building my case, she was out there doing what she did best, oversharing. Every post, every story, and each passive-aggressive jab at me felt like she was adding fuel to an already blazing fire. Her social media meltdown was a tragic mess, but let's be honest, it was also oddly entertaining. She flooded her feed with vague, dramatic captions, like, "Rebuilding after betrayal is the hardest journey, but I'll rise stronger," or "Some people only love you when they can control you. Remember your worth, queens." It was classic Emily, the victim complex, dialed up to 11, but then she made the mistake I was waiting for. A big one. It all started with a live stream. One night, I found myself scrolling through Instagram when I saw she was live. Something about it made me click, even though I knew better. There she was, sitting on her couch with a glass of wine, her face flushed and her words slurring slightly. "You know," she started, flipping her hair back with an exaggerated gesture, "people think they know me. They think they know my story." I could already feel the cringe building. "But let me tell you something," she continued. "They don't. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. She was just digging herself deeper. My ex, well, soon-to-be ex, he's just so boring, she went on, swirling her wine glass as though she were auditioning for a role in a soap opera. I mean, yeah, he's a good provider or whatever, but where's the passion? Where's the fun? I could almost hear her trying to sell a lie to anyone who'd listen. I deserve someone who makes me feel alive, you know? The comment section was exploding. Some of her followers were eating it up, sending hearts and fire emojis, but others, who had a little more sense, started questioning her. "Wait, wasn't he the one paying all your bills?" someone commented. "Didn't you cheat on him, though? Maybe focus on yourself instead of blaming him." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. And then she said something that made my blood boil. "Honestly," she slurred, "if I'd known he was going to react this way, I wouldn't have bothered sneaking around. Like, yeah, I made a mistake, but who hasn't? He just couldn't handle a woman like me." I snapped the app shut, furious. The nerve. I immediately called my lawyer. The next morning, we added her live stream to the growing pile of evidence. Between the screenshots, the texts, and now her public admission, we had more than enough to paint a very clear picture of who Emily truly was. My lawyer wasn't fazed. "Her antics are only helping your case," he reassured me. But I knew Emily wasn't done yet. A few days later, Adam sent me a frantic text. "Dude, have you seen her latest post?" I opened Instagram, and it almost made me spit out my coffee. There it was, a picture of Emily standing in front of the gym, her caption dripping with self-pity and delusion. "They say you don't know what you have until it's gone," she wrote. "But sometimes what you lose wasn't worth keeping." Starting fresh, leaving the toxicity behind, and focusing on me. It wasn't the caption that got me. It was the comments. "Wait, didn't she cheat on her husband?" one comment asked. "Is this the same guy who bought her a car? Toxic. Sis, you're the toxic one." Her followers were finally starting to turn on her. The carefully crafted image she had spent years building was unraveling before her eyes. And the best part? She had done it all to herself. By the time we made it to court, Emily was a shell of the person she once was. Her once unshakable confidence had cracked under the pressure of public scrutiny and financial strain. She had lost sponsorships thanks to her oversharing, and her lawyer was making more and more desperate demands. But the judge wasn't having any of it. With the live stream, the screenshots, and her utter lack of remorse, it didn't take long for the court to rule in my favor. Emily kept her car and a small savings account, but that was it. I, however, walked away with my savings intact, the full ownership of the house, and a clean break from the circus she had made out of her life. When the verdict came down, Emily gave me a look that I'll never forget. Half anger, half disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, a trace of regret. But by that point it didn't matter anymore. I was done. That night, Adam and I hit a bar to celebrate. "To new beginnings," he said, lifting his glass with a grin. "To peace and quiet," I answered, clinking my glass against his. It felt good. No, it felt amazing. The weight of Emily's chaos was finally lifted, and I was ready to start over. On my own terms this time. A couple of months have passed since the ruling, and I can honestly say that freedom has never tasted sweeter. The house, once a cluttered mess of Emily's chaos, ring lights, piles of delivery boxes, random workout equipment, is finally mine again. Quiet, peaceful, the way it was always meant to be. At first, I didn't know what to do with all the empty space, both physical and emotional. I'd spent so many years immersed in Emily's world, her drama, her endless ambition, her constant need for attention, that I forgot what it felt like to simply be myself. But slowly, I've started to figure it out. As for Emily, from what I've heard, she hasn't exactly made a smooth comeback. She tried doubling down on her independent queen act on Instagram, but it fell flat. People aren't fools. Her followers dwindled, sponsors dropped her, and her attempts to rebrand as some self-love coach utterly unsuccessful. Turns out it's hard to preach self-love when everyone remembers you as the woman who destroyed her marriage. She even reached out to me a couple of times. The first time was a drunken voicemail where she alternated between crying and shouting about how unfair everything was. The second time was an email, long, rambling, and filled with the usual excuses. How she missed me. How she finally realized the mistakes she'd made. How we could still fix everything. I didn't respond to either. Why would I? The chapter was closed. As for me, I decided to do something I hadn't in years. Focus on myself. I started hitting the gym regularly. Turns out, lifting weights is a great way to work through anger. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during the Emily years. And maybe most importantly, I started doing the things I genuinely enjoyed. The traveling was one of those things. For years, our vacations were all about Emily's content. Perfectly staged photos, elaborate outfits, hours spent chasing the perfect golden hour light. But my first solo trip, no cameras, no schedules, just me and the open road. It was liberating.